Whether or not it's a material change, I believe it's outweighed by the totality of the circumstances around whether or not we should throw out the RFP. So rather than getting into the minutiae, we're about to lose one of our commissioners, and I'd like to see if we could call the question.
Mr. Chairman, you gave me an opportunity to respond. In fact, I think the Vice Chair asked that I respond on the spill, and you also said that I would have an opportunity to respond after Mr. DeGrande.
That is correct.
I'm sorry. I had to leave. I was supposed to be in a place at 7 o'clock, and people were waiting for me. So it's...
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the material change, we're missing a particular issue. The rent in that we proposed in our proposal, only 1%, less than 1% of our overall projected rent was based on the slips in the basin. Less than 1%. Number two, I passed out so to talk about materiality in the context of the overall development and revenue, about less than 1%, seems a bit far-fetched. Number two, I passed out a memorandum of law that walks through every case that deals with modifications, and the key here is compliance with the RFP. So long as you're complying with the RFP, it's not an impermissible modification, and it's not a material modification. And we want to make sure...
What memorandum, I'm sorry, did you pass out?
Would you give this to the city attorney?
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it.
No problem. Would you give this to council? But you
I asked to call the question, though. Were we not going to act on that?
No, there's still some unreadiness, and unless there's, what is it, unanimous? What do we need for the call the question?
Well, according to Mason's parliamentary procedure, if Vice Chair Russell would like to make a motion to force calling the question, he may do so.
Right, so it would be considered a motion that we have to vote on without discussion, correct?
To call the question, yes, sir.
Correct. So basically, that there's no discussion about whether or not you can call a question. So if there's a call to question that's been called, for instance, like you did, and everyone does not agree that we should call the question at the moment, then we don't have to. So basically, if you want to call a question,
unanimous.
well, no, it doesn't have to be. You can move to call the question. It can be seconded, and then we can have a vote on whether or not to call the question. There's no discussion about it, though. So if is your intent to move to call the question?
That was my intent, and then
Is there a second?
lost Commissioner Gort.
Yes, I'll second for discussion.
Okay, there's no discussion. There's no discussion in the call to question.
But I did that when we had 5.
There's still no discussion in calling the question.
Again, it can be the will of the commission. It's the body that makes
Then
that
why
decision.
follow Mason's?
Well, no, Mason.
The body. What I'm saying is that the body says whether or not we want to call the question, right? So if I say the motion has been properly moved and seconded to call the question, let's call the vote.
But Mason's does allow for the body to make its own customs and rules. And so therefore, if it is the will of the body to have discussion on this motion to call the question, it's the will of the body to make that decision.
So-
There's a motion on the floor by Commissioner Russell, the second by
That was
Commissioner
while we had
Perez.
5, and I no longer have 5.
But it's still about a call. This motion is about calling the question.
Right, when we had 5. We've kept this.
Technically, it's not debatable. So if there was a call to question, just...
No, but
With 5.
But what
But
I'm
now we
saying-
have 4, and that call to question, the result may be different.
Guys,
True. The ultimate, not the call the question on the ultimate question at hand. But what I'm saying to you is that procedurally, just because you said call the question, you are not correct. So if you wanted to have a question to be called, then you say, I move to call the question. You get a second. Once you get the second, then without debate, we decide at that point whether or not we're going to call the question. That goes to a vote. When that vote is either in the positive or in the negative. If it's in the positive, then we call a question. We won't have any more discussion.
Understood. So I used the incorrect terminology when I asked about calling the question when we had 5. Now, we've moved this meeting several times because we wanted all of us to be here on this very, very important issue. And I was really interested.
If you want to move to call the question, you want to have Commissioner Gort's opinion about this, maybe he's still in the building, maybe you can have him come in. And then that would be a vote that we would take.
look, guys, can I just interject for a second?
You like.
Thank you.
That's why I was trying to
That's his
get the
attempt
vote
to do.
before he leaves.
This is a very important piece of property. You know, there's a lot of people here, and there's a lot of, with all due respect, there's a lot more people than even the people that are here that are caring about this property, number one. Number two, this is a 75-year commitment. So I don't feel rushed, personally, with all due respect. And I say this respectfully to all the people who are here. I don't feel rushed to make this decision. I understand we have a ballot issue with respect to if we decide to put this on a ballot, there's a deadline. But I personally don't feel rushed to make this decision. That's just me, because it is a 75-year commitment. So I get a little bit like dizzy here, because sometimes we seem like we're speeding up, and then sometimes we're slowing down, and then sometimes, everyone's, and we're making a 75-year commitment. I think, number one, we've made a significant amount of progress. We dealt with issue number one on our agenda today, which was the bid protest, and we got that behind us. Issue number two is we've dealt with, I think, one of the largest issues, if not the largest issue, with respect to this, which is, should we have boats in the basin or not? And we all agreed unanimously that we should not, in conformity with our master plan and in conformity with the Virginia Key Oversight Board that we created to ensure that we comply with the master plan. So I think we've made a significant amount of progress. We're now down to a few issues. Whether we should do it with a 5-member commission or not is really up to us. To be rushed to call the question, I understand. I've been there. I've been to a point where I want to call the question and certainly, move on. But this is a 75-year commitment, and this is a big piece of property. And I think there are issues, for me personally, related to, you talked about, you sort of alluded to some way of restoring the Marine Stadium. That's a big deal for me. Restoring the Marine Stadium to me is a huge part of this discussion. And it's part of why we created the Virginia Key Trust Oversight Board. Because we want to integrate everything holistically as we do things and as we move forward. But we sort of glossed over that as is this going to be part of some bond? Is this going to be part of some bond issuance? Which, by the way, is, I presume there's been talk about a general obligation bond, and I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, because I haven't heard the plan that you've heard. I haven't heard it. So is there, versus, I think what is being argued here is if we do some sort of a modification to this, if we were to get this project going, for lack of a better word, we would have a delta in terms of the amount of revenue that it would generate. That and combined with potentially the boat show or whatever, which, again, I've been very hesitant, and I've actually said that we're not going to give, and at least from my perspective, a long-term lease to the boat show without dealing with some of the issues related to Key Biscayne, and without dealing with a lot of the issues that are concerns of the members of this community here that have expressed it today. I think, that's another. The third issue is we have not talked at all about if we were, let's say, to decide in our infinite wisdom that this is broken beyond repair. Right? How do we make it better? We haven't even talked about that. And I think that's important because we talk about issues related to zoning and whether or not the zoning is the right zoning or whether we should have some other kind of zoning or not. But I thought a lot of those issues, and I've talked to each one of the proposers about that and specifically asked them, don't infer anything from my question, but how would you make it better? And I'll be honest with you, I didn't get great answers from anyone. So, I think there's more to talk about. I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about it without all 5 commissioners. I'm not in a hurry to do this, but and I don't think I'm prepared to call a question on this issue right now either, to be completely frank with you.
But there is a motion, there's a second to call the question. Would that motion and second still?
I withdraw it without Commissioner Gord here.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
The motion to call the question has been withdrawn.
Mr. Chairman?
You recognize.